I saw a tweet recently that said, quote, way too many young guys are taking life advice from childless 40-year-old men, end quote. I'm a student in my early 20s, and I'm a voracious podcast listener. Your pod, Lex Friedman, Balaji interviews, Naval, etc. I think this tweet was cynical and off the mark, but do you think people at my stage of life should be careful about relying too much on what they learn from your generation? All right, let's take a stab at this. So I think that people at any stage of life should be careful about relying too much on any particular single archetype or demographic or psychographic, right? So I will point out also, Balaji has kids, Naval has kids. So those two I would accept from the question because they're not childless. Lex, I don't believe, has kids. I do not currently have kids. So it also depends on what type of advice you are consuming. And are these people practicing what they preach? Are they walking the walk and not just talking the talk? So it depends for me highly on the type of advice. So if I'm talking to, let's say, an IFS therapist, I'm not going to ask them for, say, general contractor constructing advice for a remodel that I might be in the middle of. I'm going to recognize, just like me, just like anyone else, there are constraints and limits to the expertise of any one person. And I'm going to look for practitioners. So I would say that. And if you are getting all of your advice from people who fit neatly into a handful of parameters, let's just say 40-year-old childless men, then I do think that is a prompt for pausing and diversifying. But diversifying here really just means changing some of those variables. And I think that is incredibly helpful for your intellectual health. It is incredibly helpful for preserving a healthy level of skepticism so you don't accidentally get indoctrinated into the cult of personality X. And those are my general thoughts. Part of the reason I do this podcast and kept the Tim Ferriss Show very broad in its possible scope is I want to speak with a very wide spectrum of folks. If I only were able to speak to business people because this were strictly a business and entrepreneurship show, I would have stopped doing this a long, long time ago. And I do try to follow the advice then that I'm giving right now. And that said, I will also underscore that if you are studying and taking advice or considering advice, you should certainly consider and stress test the advice before implementing it. Then you are ahead of a lot of people who just don't do that at all, who are happy to regurgitate whatever the latest news is that they've pulled from their doom scrolling on Twitter and yell and shout on the internet. So if you are engaged in any type of self-development, you are already, I would say, ahead of the curve. But certainly, much like a physical diet, a spectrum of different foods will likely cover more bases, keep you healthier than some type of strictly regimented, monocategorical type of eating. And that's true for your information diet as well. So I would say that my general thoughts are pretty simple in that respect.